Speech by Herbert Asquith. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Speech given to the House of Commons on August 6, 1914, by Herbert Asquith. In asking the committee to agree to the resolution which Mr. Whitley has just read from the chair, I do not propose, because I do not think it is in any way necessary, to traverse again the ground which was covered by my right honorable friend, the Foreign Secretary, 2 or 3 nights ago. He stated, and I do not think any of the statements he made are capable of answer, and certainly have not yet been answered, the grounds upon which, with the utmost reluctance and with infinite regret, His Majesty's government have been compelled to put this country in a state of war, with what for many years, and indeed generations past, has been a friendly power. But, sir, the papers, which have since been presented to Parliament, and which are now in the hands of honorable members, will, I think, show how strenuous, how unremitting, how persistent, even when the last glimmer of hope seemed to have faded away, were the efforts of my right honorable friend to secure for Europe an honorable and a lasting peace. Everyone knows, in the great crisis which occurred last year in the east of Europe, it was largely, if not mainly, by the acknowledgment of all Europe, due to the steps taken by my right honorable friend, that the area of the conflict was limited, and that so far as the great powers are concerned, peace was maintained. If his efforts upon this occasion have, unhappily, been less successful, I am certain that this House and the country, and I will add posterity and history, will accord to him what is, after all, the best tribute that can be paid to any statesman, that, never derogating for an instant or by an inch from the honor and interests of his own country, he has striven, as few men have striven, to maintain and preserve the greatest interest of all countries: universal peace. These papers, which are now in the hands of honorable members, show something more than that. They show what were the terms which were offered to us in exchange for our neutrality. I trust that not only the members of this House, but all our fellow subjects everywhere, will read the communications, will read, learn, and mark the communications which passed only a week ago today between Berlin and London in this matter. The terms by which it was sought to buy our neutrality are contained in the communication made by the German Chancellor to Sir Edward Goschen on the 29th July. Number 85 of the published papers. I think I must refer to them for a moment. After alluding to the state of things as between Austria and Russia, Sir Edward Goschen goes on. He, the German Chancellor, then proceeded to make the following strong bid for British neutrality. He said that it was clear, so far as he was able to judge the main principle which governed British policy, that Great Britain would never stand by and allow France to be crushed in any conflict there might be. That, however, was not the object at which Germany aimed. Provided that neutrality of Great Britain were certain, every assurance would be given to the British government that the imperial government, let the committee observe these words, aimed at no territorial acquisition at the expense of France should they prove victorious in any war that might ensue. Sir Edward Goschen proceeded to put a very pertinent question. I questioned His Excellency about the French colonies. What are the French colonies? They mean every part of the dominions and possessions of France outside the geographical area of Europe. And he said that he was unable to give a similar undertaking in that respect. Let me come to what, in my mind, personally, has always been the crucial and almost the governing consideration, namely, the position of the small states. As regards Holland, however, His Excellency said that so long as Germany's adversaries respected the integrity and neutrality of the Netherlands, Germany was ready to give His Majesty's government an assurance that she would do likewise. Then we come to Belgium. It depended upon the action of France what operations Germany might be forced to enter upon in Belgium, but when the war was over, Belgian integrity would be respected if she had not sided against Germany. Let the committee observe the distinction between those two cases. In regard to Holland, it was not only independence and integrity, but also neutrality. But in regard to Belgium, there was no mention of neutrality at all. Nothing but an assurance that after the war came to an end, the integrity of Belgium would be respected. Then His Excellency added, ever since he had been Chancellor, the object of his policy had been to bring about an understanding with England. He trusted that these assurances, the assurances I have read out to the House, might form the basis of that understanding which he so much desired. What does that amount to? Let me just ask the committee. I do so not with the object of inflaming passion, certainly not with the object of exciting feeling against Germany, but I do so to vindicate and make clear the position of the British government in this matter. What did that proposal amount to? In the first place, it meant this: that behind the back of France, they were not made a party to these communications, we should have given, if we had assented to that, a free license to Germany to annex, in the event of a successful war, the whole of the extra-European dominions and possessions of France. What did it mean as regards Belgium? When she addressed, as she has addressed in these last few days, her moving appeal to us to fulfill our solemn guarantee of her neutrality, what reply should we have given? What reply should we have given to that Belgian appeal? We should have been obliged to say that, without her knowledge, we had bartered away to the power threatening her our obligation to keep our plighted word. The House has read, and the country has read, of course, in the last few hours, the most pathetic appeal addressed by the King of Belgium, and I do not envy the man who can read that appeal with an unmoved heart. Belgians are fighting and losing their lives. What would have been the position of Great Britain today, in the face of that spectacle, if we had assented to this infamous proposal? Yes, and what are we to get in return for the betrayal of our friends and the dishonor of our obligations? What are we to get in return? A promise, nothing more. A promise as to what Germany would do in certain eventualities. A promise, be it observed, I am sorry to have to say it, but it must be put upon record, given by a power which was at that very moment announcing its intention to violate its own treaty and inviting us to do the same. I can only say, if we had dallied or temporized, we, as a government, should have covered ourselves with dishonor, and we should have betrayed the interests of this country, of which we are trustees. I am glad, and I think the country will be glad, to turn to the reply which my right honorable friend made, and of which I will read to the committee two of the more salient passages. This document, number 101 of the papers, puts on record a week ago the attitude of the British government and, as I believe, of the British people. My right honorable friend says, His Majesty's government cannot for a moment entertain the Chancellor's proposal that they should bind themselves to neutrality on such terms. What he asks us, in effect, is to engage to stand by while French colonies are taken if France is beaten, so long as Germany does not take French territory as distinct from the colonies. From the material point of view, my right honorable friend, as he always does, used very temperate language, such a proposal is unacceptable, for France, without further territory in Europe being taken from her, could be so crushed as to lose her position as a great power, and become subordinate to German policy. That is the material aspect. But he proceeded, altogether, apart from that, it would be a disgrace for us to make this bargain with Germany at the expense of France, a disgrace from which the good name of this country would never recover. The Chancellor also, in effect, asks us to bargain away whatever obligation or interest we have as regards the neutrality of Belgium. We could not entertain that bargain either. He then says, we must preserve our full freedom to act, as circumstances may seem to us to require. And, he added, I think in sentences which the committee must appreciate, you should add most earnestly that the one way of maintaining the good relations between England and Germany is that they should continue to work together to preserve the peace of Europe. For that object, this government will work in that way with all sincerity and goodwill. If the peace of Europe can be preserved and the present crisis safely passed, my own endeavor will be to promote some arrangement to which Germany could be a party, by which she could be assured that no aggressive or hostile policy would be pursued against her or her allies by France, Russia, and ourselves, jointly or separately. I have desired this and worked for it. The statement was never more true. As far as I could, through the last Balkan crisis, and Germany having a corresponding object, our relations sensibly improved. The idea has hitherto been too utopian to form the subject of definite proposals. But if this present crisis, so much more acute than any that Europe has gone through for generations, be safely passed, I am hopeful that the relief and reaction which will follow may make possible some more definite rapprochement between the powers than has been possible hitherto. That document, in my opinion, states clearly, in temperate and convincing language, the attitude of this government. Can anyone who reads it fail to appreciate the tone of obvious sincerity and earnestness which underlies it? Can anyone honestly doubt that the government of this country, in spite of great provocation, and I regard the proposals made to us as proposals which we might have thrown aside without consideration and almost without answer, can anyone doubt that in spite of great provocation, the right honorable gentleman, who had already earned the title, and no one ever more deserved it, of Peacemaker of Europe, persisted to the very last moment of the last hour in that beneficent but unhappily frustrated purpose? I am entitled to say, and I do so on behalf of this country, I speak not for a party, I speak for the country as a whole, that we made every effort any government could possibly make for peace. But this war has been forced upon us. What is it we are fighting for? Everyone knows, and no one knows better than the government, the terrible, incalculable suffering, economic, social, personal, and political, which war, and especially a war between the great powers of the world, must entail. There is no man amongst us sitting upon this bench in these trying days, more trying perhaps than any body of statesmen for 100 years have had to pass through. There is not a man amongst us who has not, during the whole of that time, had clearly before his vision the almost unequaled suffering which war, even in a just cause, must bring about, not only to the peoples who are for the moment living in this country and in the other countries of the world, but to posterity and to the whole prospects of European civilization. Every step we took with that vision before our eyes, and with a sense of responsibility which it is impossible to describe. Unhappily, if in spite of all our efforts to keep the peace, and with that full and overpowering consciousness of the result, if the issue be decided in favor of war, we have, nevertheless, thought it to be the duty as well as the interest of this country to go to war, the House may be well assured it was because we believe, and I am certain the country will believe, that we are unsheathing our sword in a just cause. If I am asked what we are fighting for, I reply in 2 sentences. In the first place, to fulfill a solemn international obligation, an obligation which, if it had been entered into between private persons in the ordinary concerns of life, would have been regarded as an obligation not only of law, but of honor, which no self-respecting man could possibly have repudiated. I say, secondly, we are fighting to vindicate the principle which, in these days when force, material force, sometimes seems to be the dominant influence and factor in the development of mankind, we are fighting to vindicate the principle that small nationalities are not to be crushed, in defiance of international good faith, by the arbitrary will of a strong and overmastering power. I do not believe any nation ever entered into a great controversy, and this is one of the greatest history will ever know, with a clearer conscience and a stronger conviction that it is fighting not for aggression, not for the maintenance even of its own selfish interest, but that it is fighting in defense of principles the maintenance of which is vital to the civilization of the world. With a full conviction, not only of the wisdom and justice, but of the obligations which lay upon us to challenge this great issue, we are entering into the struggle. Let us now make sure that all the resources, not only of this United Kingdom, but of the vast empire of which it is the center, shall be thrown into the scale. And it is that object may be adequately secured that I am now about to ask this committee, to make the very unusual demand upon it, to give the government a vote of credit of £100 million. I am not going, and I am sure the committee do not wish it, into the technical distinctions between votes of credit and supplementary estimates and all the rarities and refinements which arise in that connection. There is a much higher point of view than that. If it were necessary, I could justify, upon purely technical grounds, the course we propose to adopt, but I am not going to do so, because I think it would be foreign to the temper and disposition of the committee. There is one thing to which I do call attention, that is, the title and heading of the bill. As a rule, in the past, votes of this kind have been taken simply for naval and military operations. But we have thought it right to ask the committee to give us its confidence in the extension of the traditional area of votes of credit, so that this money, which we are asking them to allow us to expend, may be applied not only for strictly naval and military operations, but to assist the food supplies, promote the continuance of trade, industry, business, and communications, whether by means of insurance or indemnity against risk or otherwise, for the relief of distress, and generally for all expenses arising out of the existence of a state of war. I believe the committee will agree with us that it was wise to extend the area of the vote of credit so as to include all these various matters. It gives the government a free hand. Of course, the Treasury will account for it, and any expenditure that takes place will be subject to the approval of the House. I think it would be a great pity, in fact, a great disaster, if, in a crisis of this magnitude, we were not enabled to make provision far more needed now than it was under the simpler conditions that prevailed in the old days, for all the various ramifications and developments of expenditure which the existence of a state of war between the great powers of Europe must entail on any one of them. I am asking also, in my character of Secretary of State for War, a position which I held until this morning, for a supplementary estimate for men for the Army. Perhaps the committee will allow me for a moment just to say on that personal matter that I took upon myself the office of Secretary of State for War under conditions, upon which I need not go back, but which are fresh in the minds of everyone, in the hope and with the object that the condition of things in the Army, which all of us deplored, might speedily be brought to an end, and complete confidence re-established. I believe that is the case. In fact, I know it to be. There is no more loyal and united body, no body in which the spirit and habit of discipline are more deeply ingrained and cherished than in the British Army. Glad as I should have been to continue the work of that office, and I would have done so under normal conditions, it would not be fair to the Army, it would not be just to the country that any minister should divide his attention between that department and another, still less that the first minister of the Crown, who has to look into the affairs of all departments and who is ultimately responsible for the whole policy of the cabinet, should give, as he could only give, perfunctory attention to the affairs of our army in a great war. I am very glad to say that a very distinguished soldier and administrator, in the person of Lord Kitchener, with that great public spirit and patriotism that everyone would expect from him, at my request stepped into the breach. Lord Kitchener, as everyone knows, is not a politician. His association with the government as a member of the cabinet for this purpose must not be taken as in any way identifying him with any set of political opinions. He has, at a great public emergency, responded to a great public call, and I am certain he will have with him, in the discharge of one of the most arduous tasks that has ever fallen upon a minister, the complete confidence of all parties and all opinions. I am asking, on his behalf for the army, power to increase the number of men of all ranks, in addition to the number already voted, by no less than 500,000. I am certain the committee will not refuse its sanction, for we are encouraged to ask for it not only by our own sense of the gravity and the necessities of the case, but by the knowledge that India is prepared to send us certainly 2 divisions, and that every one of our self-governing dominions, spontaneously and unasked, has already tendered to the utmost limits of their possibilities, both in men and in money, every help they can afford to the Empire in a moment of need. Sir, the mother country must set the example, while she responds with gratitude and affection to those filial overtures from the outlying members of her family. I will say no more. This is not an occasion for controversial discussion. In all that I have said, I believe I have not gone, either in the statement of our case or in my general description of the provision we think it necessary to make, beyond the strict bounds of truth. It is not my purpose, it is not the purpose of any patriotic man, to inflame feeling, to indulge in rhetoric, to excite international animosities. The occasion is far too grave for that. We have a great duty to perform. We have a great trust to fulfill. And confidently we believe that Parliament and the country will enable us to do it. End of speech. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan.